Captain Zarak of the Krulthari Collective stood motionless on the bridge of the Void Render, her 12-limbed body a study in calculated predation. Holographic displays flickered around her, casting an eerie blue-green light across her obsidian exoskeleton. Each of her sensory tendrils quivered with the precision of thousand-year-old hunting algorithms, scanning the approaching planetary system with clinical detachment. Earth hung before them, the blue-green marble suspended in the infinite darkness, completely unaware of the doom bearing down upon it. Preliminary scan complete, droned Sub-Commander Krellix, his vocal synthesizer producing a sound like grinding metal. Technological progression: primitive. Defensive capabilities: minimal. Projected conquest time: approximately 72 standard cycles. Zarak's secondary neural cluster pulsed with a sensation closest to what lesser species might call boredom. This would be her 138th planetary conquest, another footnote in the Krulthari's millennia-long campaign of galactic pacification. Her battle record was impeccable. Entire civilizations had crumbled before her fleet in less time than it took most species to complete a reproductive cycle. The Void Render was a testament to Krulthari technological supremacy. Nearly 5 kilometers long, its hull constructed from metamolecular alloys that could absorb most known weapon spectrums, the ship represented the pinnacle of evolutionary warfare. Surrounding it, 37 additional motherships formed a perfect geometric formation, each capable of reducing a continent to molecular dust in mere moments. What the Krulthari didn't see were the countless eyes watching them. In a nondescript monitoring station buried deep beneath Cheyenne Mountain, a team of astronomers and military analysts had been tracking the alien fleet's approach for weeks. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, her fingers flying across holographic interfaces, had been the first to detect the anomalous approach vectors. "They think we don't know they're coming," she muttered to Colonel James Harper, her longtime colleague and head of what was unofficially called the Weird Shit Division. Harper's weathered face broke into a grim smile. Let them keep thinking that. Unbeknownst to the Krulthari, humanity had been preparing for this moment far longer than the aliens could imagine. The past decade had seen unprecedented global cooperation, not through peaceful means, but through a shared understanding that something was coming. Military budgets had been quietly redirected. Research into experimental technologies had accelerated. Every major nation had been building, preparing, waiting. Back on the Void Render, Captain Zarak reviewed the standard conquest protocols. Planetary surrender typically followed a predictable pattern: initial shock, followed by infrastructure destruction, then psychological warfare, and finally total submission. She had personally overseen the fall of civilizations far more advanced than this small blue planet. Her tertiary sensory cluster detected something unusual, a subtle electromagnetic anomaly that didn't match any known planetary defense signature. For the first time in her 300-cycle military career, Zarak felt something akin to uncertainty. "Sub-Commander," she clicked, her communication tentacles producing a sound like chattering precision instruments. "Run a tertiary diagnostic on our quantum shielding. Something feels different about this world." Little did Captain Zarak know that different was about to become the understatement of the galactic millennium. As the Krulthari fleet prepared its approach, humanity waited, not in fear, not in panic, but with the cold, calculated readiness of a species that had spent its entire evolutionary history preparing to fight something bigger, stronger, and seemingly insurmountable. The invasion was coming, and nothing could have prepared the Krulthari for what was about to happen. The first wave of Krulthari landing pods crashed into Los Angeles with the force of tactical nuclear strikes. Gleaming obsidian vessels punched through skyscrapers, their metamolecular hulls effortlessly slicing through concrete and steel like paper. Sub-Commander Krellix watched from the command deck, expecting the standard sequence of planetary submission. Initial shock, followed by panic, then capitulation. Instead, he witnessed something entirely unprecedented. On Sunset Boulevard, A film production team that had been working on a massive science fiction epic transformed their elaborate movie set crane into an improvised anti-gravity weapon within minutes. Jake Rodriguez, a veteran special effects engineer, had spent years designing impossible mechanical systems for blockbuster films. Now those skills became something far more deadly. Recalibrating hydraulic stabilizers, he shouted to his team. Massive cables that had once simulated alien spacecraft now became power conduits. The crane's advanced motion capture rigging became a targeting system. Within 17 minutes of the first landing, the massive crane began launching electromagnetic pulse charges that tore through the alien landing pods like tissue paper. Simultaneously, in Tokyo, a collective of robotics engineers from 3 competing tech companies made a decision that would reshape the nature of planetary defense. Keiko Tanaka, lead engineer at a delivery drone manufacturer, realized their entire fleet could become a weapon. Override primary directives, she commanded, her fingers flying across a holographic interface. Repurpose all autonomous delivery units for combat protocols. Thousands of drones, originally designed to deliver packages with millimeter-perfect precision, suddenly became a swarm of coordinated aerial weapons. Their advanced AI, built to navigate complex urban environments, now calculated optimal attack vectors against alien ground units. Packages were replaced with improvised explosive devices. Navigation systems became targeting computers. In Cairo, a collective of hackers led by Amir El-Masri transformed the city's entire traffic management system into a living, breathing defense network. Smart cameras became target acquisition systems. Traffic control computers became command and control centers. Autonomous vehicles became mobile weapon platforms. The Krell-Thuri ground commanders watched in growing horror as humanity did something no conquered species had ever done before. They'd weaponized their entire civilization in real time. Captain Zorok's communication tendrils went into overdrive, trying to process the impossible data streaming in from ground units. Their initial scans had shown a primitive technological infrastructure. What they were witnessing defied every known protocol of planetary invasion. In New York, construction workers turned their heavy machinery into improvised tanks. Subway maintenance teams used underground tunnel networks to launch coordinated counterattacks. Even professional sports teams, with their intricate understanding of strategy and teamwork, began organizing local resistance groups. A Krell-Thuri assault team attempting to secure a research facility in Silicon Valley found themselves fighting against weaponized 3D printers creating custom ammunition, robotic assembly lines reconfigured into defensive turrets, and network engineers turning communication systems into electronic warfare platforms. Sub-Commander Krellix's neural clusters began to overheat from the sheer computational complexity of human response. Their invasion strategy assumed a hierarchical military response. Instead, they faced a distributed, adaptive network that seemed to think and fight as a single, massive organism. Tactical assessment impossible, he clicked to Captain Zorok, his communication tentacles producing a sound of genuine distress. The humans are adapting faster than our predictive algorithms can process. By the end of the first 6 hours, the Krell-Thuri had lost 47% of their initial ground invasion force, not to advanced weaponry, but to humanity's terrifying ability to turn anything and everything into a potential weapon. A broadcast intercepted by the alien fleet caught Captain Zorok's attention. It was a live stream from a group of high school robotics club members who were using their competition drone design to jam alien communication frequencies. "Did you see that?" One teenager laughed. "Totally not what we designed this for in competition." The Krell-Thuri were beginning to understand a fundamental truth about humanity. For them, limitation was nothing more than a temporary inconvenience. Every system could be reimagined. Every constraint could be overcome. The invasion had begun, and nothing was going according to plan. The first human prisoner presented to the Krell-Thuri interrogation team was Staff Sergeant Michael Chen, a former stand-up comedian turned Marine Corps communications specialist. He sat in the sterile interrogation chamber, his hands bound by quantum-locked restraints that should have crushed the spirit of any known sentient being. Instead, he smiled. Lead Interrogator Vexka, a veteran of 276 successful psychological deconstructions, approached with her primary sensory tendrils extended. The standard Krell-Theory interrogation protocol was simple and brutally effective. Isolate the subject, expose psychological vulnerabilities, and systematically break down individual and collective resistance. You will provide us with critical infrastructure details, Vexka's translator module intoned, or you will experience computational deconstruction that will reduce your consciousness to its base molecular components. Michael Chen began to laugh. Okay, so a quantum physicist, a Marine, and an AI walk into a bar. He started, his eyes twinkling with a madness that immediately registered as anomalous in Vexka's threat assessment algorithms. Wanna hear the rest of the joke? In another detention facility, Dr. Helena Ortiz, a philosophy professor captured during the initial invasion, engaged her alien captors in a dialogue that would become legendary among the Krell-Theory intelligence corps. Your entire concept of conquest, she explained, her hands gesturing with academic precision despite being restrained, is predicated on a linear understanding of power that fundamentally misunderstands the nature of human resilience. The Krell-Theory had perfected psychological warfare over millennia. They could reduce most species to quivering submission within hours. Their interrogation techniques had broken civilizations more advanced than humanity, crushing resistance through a combination of sensory manipulation, computational torture, and precise psychological deconstruction. Humanity, they would discover, played by entirely different rules. In the detention center beneath San Francisco, another interrogation unfolded. A local high school debate team captain named HFY was being questioned about communication infrastructure. The Krell-Theory interrogators expected terror. What they received was a masterclass in rhetorical warfare. Let me explain why your entire invasion is logically inconsistent. Aisha began, launching into a 5-point argument that left her alien interrogators more confused than intimidated. The problem, the Krell-Theory were discovering, was that humans didn't process psychological pressure like any other species they had encountered. Where most civilizations would break, humans seemed to become more creative, more resilient, more dangerous. Vexka's preliminary psychological profile on Michael Chen read like a nightmare. Threat assessment, extreme. Psychological stability, impossible to QUANTIFI. Potential for resistance, exponential. The joke is that the quantum physicist looks at the Marine and says, Chen continued, completely ignoring the threat of molecular deconstruction, I'm pretty sure we can weaponize this bar. Vexka's neural clusters began to overheat. This was not how interrogations were supposed to proceed. Dr. Helena Ortiz, meanwhile, had begun a philosophical discourse that was systematically dismantling the fundamental ethical framework of Krell-Theory military doctrine. She wasn't just resisting. She was teaching, analyzing, breaking down their entire cultural understanding of conflict. Your model of conquest assumes a hierarchical power structure, she explained, but humanity operates more like a distributed network. We don't have a single point of failure. We adapt. We reimagine. We transform. The Krell-Theory had technologies that could read brainwaves, simulate psychological breaking points, and reduce most species to computational rubble. Against humans, these technologies produced nothing but increasingly bizarre and unpredictable results. Aisha Khalid concluded her logical deconstruction of the invasion by offering her interrogators a detailed critique of their tactical approach, complete with footnotes and a bibliography. Would you like me to explain the logical fallacies in your invasion strategy? She asked, as if offering a tutorial rather than being a prisoner. By the end of the first 72 hours, the Krell-Theory Psychological Warfare Division had been reduced to a state of near-total computational confusion. Their interrogation databases, built over millennia of galactic conquest, were proving utterly useless against a species that seemed to weaponize creativity. humor, and abstract thinking. Humanity wasn't just resisting. They were enjoying the process. In the first 96 hours of the invasion, humanity transformed into a living, breathing technological ecosystem that defied every known principle of warfare. The MIT Nuclear Science and Engineering Lab became ground zero for technological rebellion. Dr. Imani Williams, a quantum computing researcher, stood before a holographic display that looked more like an abstract art installation than a weapons system. Behind her, a team of graduate students, postdocs, and senior researchers moved with the synchronized precision of a military unit, except their weapons were lines of code and experimental quantum algorithms. "We're going to turn their own technology against them," Dr. Williams announced, her fingers dancing across quantum entanglement interfaces that would have looked like science fiction just weeks ago. Across the country, every research facility, tech company, and innovation center had transformed into a distributed war machine. In Silicon Valley, 3 competing tech giants, who had spent years locked in ruthless market competition, now worked with a level of collaboration that would have been impossible under any other circumstances. At the Alphabet X research facility, what was once called moonshot thinking became literal survival strategy. Experimental technologies that had been shelved for being too radical were now being fast-tracked into production. Augmented reality systems became battlefield coordination tools. Machine learning algorithms designed to optimize climate models were repurposed to predict and counter alien tactical movements. In Tokyo, the robotics team at RIKEN had been developing next-generation prosthetics with neural interface technologies. Now, those same neural interface systems became the core of a distributed defense network that could coordinate human and semi-autonomous robotic responses faster than any centralized command structure. The Krell had anticipated fighting the traditional military. Instead, they found themselves battling an entire civilization's worth of innovation. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, from the Cheyenne Mountain Monitoring Station, had been preparing for this moment her entire career. Her team had been tracking potential extraterrestrial threats for decades, developing contingency plans that seemed like science fiction to most of her colleagues. "We're not just defending," she told Colonel Harper as they monitored a real-time holographic display showing global technological responses. "We're learning, adapting. Every alien system we encounter is another piece of technology we can understand, reverse engineer, and ultimately weaponize." A group of marine biologists in Woods Hole, Massachusetts, discovered they could jam alien communication frequencies using techniques derived from deep-sea creature communication patterns. What began as pure scientific curiosity became a critical component of global defense. In Shenzhen, China, a collective of hardware hackers began producing custom electromagnetic pulse generators using components from smartphone manufacturing lines. Entire factories that had once produced consumer electronics were now churning out defensive technologies at a pace that defied industrial logistics. The Krell fleet's quantum communication networks, considered the most secure in the known galaxy, began to experience inexplicable disruptions. Human programmers were finding vulnerabilities faster than the aliens could patch them, turning the invaders' most sophisticated technologies into potential weaknesses. Dr. Williams' quantum computing team at MIT discovered something truly revolutionary. By analyzing the quantum entanglement signatures of the alien technology, they could not just intercept communications, but potentially predict alien tactical movements before they happened. "It's like they're playing chess," one of her graduate students observed, "and we're rewriting the rules of the game while they're playing." The most terrifying aspect for the Krell was the speed of human innovation. What would take their civilization decades to develop was being conceptualized, prototyped, and deployed by humans in hours. A team of teenagers in a high school robotics club in Mumbai created a drone communication network that could outmaneuver the aliens' most advanced tracking systems. In Seattle, a group of independent game developers turned their understanding of complex system design into tactical coordination algorithms. Everywhere, Humanity was proving that technology was more than just hardware and software. It was a living, breathing extension of human creativity, adaptability, and relentless problem-solving. The invasion had become a global hackathon, with the highest possible stakes, and humanity was just getting started. The Apache Reservation in Arizona became the most unexpected military think tank in human history. Joseph Redbird, a 62-year-old tribal elder and former U.S. Army Ranger, stood before a mixed group of military strategists, indigenous trackers, and special forces operatives. His weathered hands traced a complex map that blended satellite imagery with traditional tracking techniques passed down through generations. "They think like machines," Joseph explained, his voice a low rumble that carried centuries of survival wisdom. "We think like the land." The Krell had anticipated conventional military resistance. Instead, they found themselves fighting an enemy that saw warfare as an art form of adaptation, misdirection, and environmental integration. Native American tracking experts began developing counter-reconnaissance techniques that completely nullified the aliens' advanced scanning technologies. They used wind patterns, ground vibrations, and terrain understanding that no computational system could fully predict. Where alien sensors expected straight lines and predictable movements, human tactics became a living, breathing ecosystem of resistance. In the dense urban landscape of Lagos, Nigeria, a collective of street performers and urban parkour experts transformed the city into a living weapon. What the Krell saw as an urban environment, these human defenders saw as a three-dimensional combat playground. Akin Oladil, a professional parkour instructor, had spent years teaching people to see urban spaces as fluid, adaptable environments. Now, those skills became a critical component of urban defense. Rooftops became sniper positions, narrow alleyways became kill zones, underground drainage systems became communication and movement networks. "They're looking for soldiers," Akin told his team. "We're going to show them what happens when an entire city fights back." Marine biologists in the Pacific Northwest discovered something extraordinary. By studying the communication and defensive mechanisms of deep-sea organisms, they developed jamming techniques that could disrupt alien communication frequencies in ways no conventional electronic warfare could achieve. Dr. Maria Gonzalez, leading the research team, explained their breakthrough to a group of stunned military commanders. Certain deep-sea creatures have developed communication and defensive mechanisms that make our most advanced technologies look primitive. We're not just copying nature, we're learning from billions of years of evolutionary adaptation. The Krell found themselves fighting an enemy that didn't just resist, they reimagined the entire concept of resistance. In the mountains of Nepal, a group of Sherpa guides began developing terrain-based warfare techniques that turned the landscape itself into a weapon. They understood something the aliens did not. True warfare was about understanding environment, not just technology. "The mountain is always fighting," one Sherpa tracker explained. "We are just its instrument." Drone operators discovered they could use swarm tactics inspired by everything from insect colonies to bird flocking behaviors. Each drone became not just a weapon, but a node in a living, adaptive network that could reconfigure itself faster than any centralized command could predict. A team of competitive video game players brought their understanding of complex system dynamics to military coordination. Their ability to process multiple streams of information, predict opponent behaviors, and make split-second tactical decisions became a critical component of human defense strategies. The most terrifying aspect for the Krell was the complete lack of a centralized command structure. Where most species they had conquered had clear military hierarchies, humanity fought like a distributed, adaptive network. Every individual was a potential strategist. Every environment was a potential weapon. In the Brazilian rainforest, indigenous communities shared tracking techniques that had been developed over thousands of years. Their understanding of camouflage, movement, and environmental integration became a critical component of guerrilla resistance tactics. "We have always been fighting something bigger than ourselves," said Maria Caxana, an indigenous leader. This is nothing new. By the 2-week mark of the invasion, the Kreltheri realized they were no longer fighting a military. They were fighting an entire planet that had transformed itself into a living, breathing defense mechanism. Humanity wasn't just resisting. They were rewriting the fundamental rules of warfare. And they were just getting started. The Kreltheri Intelligence Division spent 3 days analyzing a single intercepted human communication stream before their primary analysis systems began to overheat. It wasn't a military transmission. It was a live-streamed concert. In the middle of an active war zone in Rio de Janeiro, a group of musicians had set up on a partially destroyed stage. Drums made from repurposed alien landing pod fragments. Guitars cobbled together from salvaged communication equipment. A vocalist who switched between singing and coordinating local defense networks between musical numbers. Vexka, the lead intelligence analyst, found her neural clusters struggling to process the information. Humans were simultaneously creating art, maintaining psychological resistance, and coordinating tactical responses, all within the same communication stream. The concert was more than a performance. It was a living, breathing testament to human resilience. Intercepted communications revealed layers of complexity that defied all Kreltheri understanding of psychological warfare. Soldiers shared memes during bombardments. Artists documented the invasion in real time. Communities became stronger through shared struggle. In a detention center outside of Mumbai, a group of imprisoned writers began what they called the Invasion Documentation Project. With improvised writing tools, pencils made from broken furniture, pages torn from discarded manuals, they began meticulously recording every detail of the alien invasion. "This is our resistance," explained Priya Sharma, a science fiction author turned unexpected war chronicler. "They can take our freedom, but they cannot take our ability to tell our story." The Kreltheri discovered something terrifying. Humans didn't just fight. They contextualized. They found meaning. They transformed trauma into narrative. Social media platforms became more than communication networks. They became real-time intelligence gathering systems, psychological support networks, and tactical coordination centers. A teenager in Buenos Aires could provide critical reconnaissance information while simultaneously sharing a joke that would be understood by resistance groups thousands of miles away. In New Orleans, a group of street performers began using elaborate performance art as a method of communication and resistance. Their complex choreography contained embedded tactical information. What looked like a dance performance was actually a sophisticated method of sharing intelligence across urban resistance networks. "Art is just another form of encryption," explained Marcus Williams, the performance group's leader. "And we're really good at creating complex systems." The Kreltheri had conquered civilizations that broke under psychological pressure. Humanity did something entirely different. They transformed psychological pressure into creative fuel. A group of stand-up comedians began producing daily live streams that were part psychological warfare, part morale-boosting performance, part tactical information sharing. Their comedy routines contained coded information about alien movement patterns. Their jokes became a form of psychological inoculation against invasion-induced trauma. "Humor is how humans process the impossible," one comedian explained during a broadcast. "We're literally laughing in the face of an apocalypse." Children's schools transformed into distributed learning and resistance centers. Educational platforms became tactical training grounds. A mathematics lesson could seamlessly transition into a discussion about alien technology vulnerabilities. A literature class might include strategies for psychological resistance. In the Arctic research stations, scientists continued their work with a level of focus that bordered on the absurd. Even as alien ships filled the sky, researchers were collecting data, publishing preliminary findings, maintaining the fundamental human drive to understand. Scientific method doesn't stop for an invasion, Dr. Elena Rodriguez told her team. If anything, it becomes more important. The Kreltheri discovered that human culture was not a weakness to be exploited, but a complex, adaptive system more sophisticated than any technological defense. Every aspect of human existence became a potential method of resistance. Music was communication. Art was intelligence gathering. Education was tactical training. Humor was psychological warfare. They weren't just fighting a military. They were fighting an entire cultural ecosystem that could transform, adapt, and resist at a moment's notice. Humanity wasn't just surviving the invasion. They were documenting it, understanding it, and finding moments of connection within it. And they were just getting started. Captain Zorak watched her tactical displays disintegrate into chaos. The quantum communication networks, pinnacle of Krell technological achievement, were collapsing faster than her neural clusters could process. What had begun as a standard planetary conquest had transformed into an existential nightmare that defied every known principle of galactic warfare. Tactical integrity compromised. Sub-Commander Krellix reported, his communication tendrils producing a sound between a mechanical click and an organic groan of despair. Human countermeasures are not just effective. They are evolving. The underground data centers of Silicon Valley had become something beyond a simple command structure. Entire networks of researchers, programmers, and engineers were creating adaptive defense systems that learned and transformed faster than the Krell could analyze them. What should have been a simple infrastructure attack had become a living, breathing technological organism. A satellite communication array repurposed by a team of amateur radio enthusiasts became a planet-wide targeting system. Underground server farms transformed into impenetrable command bunkers that could withstand nuclear-level attacks. Each human technological response was not just a defense, it was an entirely new method of conceptualizing warfare. In orbit, the Krell fleet found themselves fighting against a distributed network of satellites, communication platforms, and improvised space defense systems. Experimental spacecraft designed by private aerospace companies became unexpected weapon platforms. Communication satellites became jamming stations. Even defunct space exploration equipment was being brought back to life and weaponized. They are not just defending, Zorak clicked to her command team. They are reimagining the entire concept of planetary defense. The Native American tracking teams had developed counter-reconnaissance techniques that completely nullified alien scanning technologies. Wind patterns, ground vibrations, and terrain understanding created blind spots in the most advanced alien sensors. Where the Krell expected predictable movement, they found a resistance that moved like liquid, formless, adaptive, impossible to pin down. Deep in the Amazon rainforest, indigenous communities had transformed their understanding of environmental integration into a weapon more sophisticated than any technological defense. They used techniques developed over thousands of years, camouflage, movement, environmental understanding, that made traditional military tactics look primitively linear. A group of competitive video game players brought their understanding of complex system dynamics to military coordination. Their ability to process multiple information streams, predict opponent behaviors, and make split-second tactical decisions became a critical component of human defense strategies. The most terrifying aspect was the complete lack of a centralized command structure. Where most species had clear military hierarchies, humanity fought like a distributed, adaptive network. Every individual was a potential strategist. Every environment was a potential weapon. Marine biologists discovered jamming techniques derived from deep-sea creature communication patterns. Robotics teams created neural interface systems that could coordinate human and semi-autonomous responses faster than any centralized command could predict. A high school robotics club in Mumbai developed a drone communication network that could outmaneuver the most advanced alien tracking systems. Captain Zorak realized they were no longer fighting a military. They were fighting an entire planet that had transformed itself into a living, breathing defense mechanism. The retreat began not as a strategic decision, but as a fundamental recognition of an impossible scenario. The Krell had conquered civilizations that numbered in the hundreds. They had reduced entire planetary systems to molecular dust. But humanity was something entirely different. A species that did not just resist, but transformed resistance into an art form. "We are experiencing computational failure," Krulix reported, his voice a mixture of mechanical precision and something closer to fear. "Human response patterns are not just unpredictable. They are creating new paradigms of conflict faster than our analysis systems can process." Satellite communication networks showed human resistance growing more sophisticated with each passing hour. What should have been a planetary conquest had become an evolutionary crucible that was rewriting the fundamental understanding of technological adaptation. The Krell were not just losing a battle. They were encountering a species that fundamentally rewrote the rules of conflict, survival, and technological development. Humanity wasn't just surviving. They were evolving in real time. And they were just getting started. The galactic communication networks trembled with a message that would redefine interstellar understanding forever. On the burned and battered surface of Earth, humanity stood not as a conquered planet, but as a warning beacon to every spacefaring civilization. The Krell retreat was more than a military withdrawal. It was a fundamental reassessment of what intelligent life could be. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood before the United Nations Emergency Council, her presentation less a military briefing and more a philosophical deconstruction of first contact. Star charts behind her showed the Krell invasion route, now marked with a series of computational failure points that defied standard scientific understanding. "They didn't just underestimate us," she explained, her voice carrying the weight of a species that had just survived its first true existential threat. "They fundamentally misunderstood the nature of adaptive intelligence." Across the planet, the invasion had done something unprecedented. Nations that had been bitter rivals now shared technological developments. Cultural barriers dissolved in the crucible of planetary defense. The most sophisticated technologies emerged from the most unexpected collaborations. A quantum computing breakthrough from a joint team of Iranian and Israeli researchers, advanced neural network defense systems, developed by a collective of programmers from countries that had never before shared scientific resources. In the ruins of Silicon Valley, a new kind of global research center emerged, not a traditional military-industrial complex, but a distributed network of innovation that saw the recent invasion as just another problem to be solved, analyzed, and ultimately transformed into an opportunity for growth. The Krell communication intercepts told a story of total computational breakdown. Their most sophisticated analysis systems had simply failed. Humanity was not just a species to be conquered, but a fundamental category error in their understanding of intelligent life. Captain Zorok's final transmission to the Krell High Command became a legendary document, studied across multiple star systems. Threat assessment impossible. Human capability cannot be quantified by existing computational models. Recommend total strategic reanalysis of planetary engagement protocols. Universities that had once competed for research grants now operated as a global, distributed research network. The invasion had accelerated human technological development by decades, perhaps centuries. Technologies that would have taken generations to develop emerged in weeks. Neural interface systems, quantum communication networks, adaptive AI, all became not just possible, but practical. Indigenous tracking techniques merged with advanced computational models. Street performance art became a sophisticated method of information distribution. Every human cultural practice became a potential technological innovation. The first interstellar probe launched just 18 months after the invasion. It was not a military vessel, but a research platform that embodied humanity's newfound understanding. Built from technologies developed during the conflict, it carried not just scientific instruments, but cultural artifacts. Music, art, literature. A complete representation of human complexity. "We are not just sending a probe," explained Dr. Rodriguez. "We are sending a message." Alien civilizations that had watched the Krell invasion began to reassess their understanding of humanity. The communication networks buzzed with a new recognition. Earth was not a potential conquest. It was a warning. The most sophisticated intelligence analysts across multiple star systems came to a single conclusion. Humanity was not just a species. It was a systemic approach to existence that transformed every challenge into an opportunity for growth. Video recordings of human resistance became required study in alien military academies, not as a tactical manual, but as a fundamental reimagining of what intelligent resistance could be. The concert in Rio de Janeiro, the indigenous tracking teams in the Amazon, the high school robotics club in Mumbai. These were not just isolated incidents. They were representative of a species-wide approach to existence. Xerox, now in permanent diplomatic isolation, would spend the rest of her computational existence trying to understand what had happened. The Krell theory would become a cautionary tale, the civilization that tried to conquer a species it could never understand. Earth continued to evolve, not as a planet that had survived an invasion, but as a civilization that had been transformed by the very challenge meant to destroy it. And they were just getting started.